The brass bell above the door of Chen's apothecary chimed for what Marcus Davidson assumed would be the last time. The real estate developer strode in with his usual air of entitled confidence, flanked by his demolition team and legal counsel. "I'm Sarah Chun, 35, third-generation owner of the last traditional apothecary shop in River Heights. The store my grandfather started a century ago was more than just a business. It was a piece of living history, a bridge between traditional Chinese medicine and modern healthcare." "Ms. Chun," Marcus adjusted his Italian silk tie, "I trust you've had time to reconsider our offer. The demolition permits have been approved, and frankly, your continued resistance is just delaying the inevitable." I looked around my shop, at the gleaming wood cabinets my grandfather had hand-carved, the wall of carefully labeled drawers containing herbs and remedies, the old counter where 3 generations of Chens had helped heal their community. "Actually," I smiled, wheeling out a battered metal box from behind the counter, "I have something you need to see before any demolition begins." Marcus sighed theatrically. "Another delay tactic? The Historical Preservation Board already ruled that this building doesn't qualify for protection. Progress can't be stopped by sentiment, Ms. Chun. This isn't about sentiment." I placed the box on the counter. "This is about a legally binding condition placed on this property in 1922, when Mayor William Harrison helped my grandfather establish this shop." The developer's lawyer, Elizabeth Morton, stepped forward with interest. "What condition?" I opened the box carefully, revealing documents preserved in protective sleeves. The mayor buried this time capsule beneath the foundation stone. It was only to be opened if someone tried to destroy the building. "Inside is a deed restriction that might interest you." Marcus waved dismissively. "Any ancient restrictions would have shown up in our title search." "Not this one," I interrupted, pulling out the first document, "because it wasn't filed with the property deed. It was filed under a special act of the City Council, recorded in their private archives. An act that's still in force." The lawyer took the document, her eyes widening as she read. "This is unusual." "What?" Marcus snapped. "It's a perpetual covenant," Elizabeth explained slowly, "tied not to the property deed, but to the city's founding charter. The building can never be demolished as long as it serves its original purpose, providing medical care that bridges cultural traditions." I pulled out more papers from the box. Mayor Harrison's wife had been seriously ill. Traditional doctors couldn't help her, but my grandfather's remedies saved her life. The mayor was so grateful. He ensured this shop would always have a place in River Heights. Marcus's face darkened. "That's impossible. No property restriction can last forever." "Actually," Elizabeth cut in, "when it's tied to a city charter as a matter of public health policy, it can, especially given the unique historical context." She showed him another document. "This isn't just a deed restriction. It's a public health ordinance designating this building as a permanent medical heritage site." But there was more in that time capsule, much more. As I prepared to reveal the next document, I thought about what my father had told me before he died. "The shop holds more secrets than just medicines, Sarah. Sometimes the most powerful remedy is truth itself." Marcus must have seen something in my expression. "What else is in that box?" "History," I replied quietly. "The kind of history that certain people might prefer stays buried. Like the real reason this neighborhood was suddenly rezoned for high-rise development after a century of historic protection." The developer's confident facade cracked slightly. He knew what I was talking about: the mysterious city council vote, the rushed rezoning process, the whispered allegations of bribery that no one dared speak aloud. "Your luxury condo project," I continued, "isn't the first time someone's tried to demolish this block. The time capsule includes records of every attempt, and why they all failed, including some interesting notes about certain political families in River Heights." Elizabeth was reading another document from the box, her professional composure slipping. "Mr. Davidson, we need to discuss this privately. Now, because this wasn't just about saving one historic building. This was about exposing a century of corruption, of deals made in shadows, of power wielded against the public good. And my grandfather, with the help of a grateful mayor, had prepared for this moment decades before I was born." "The demolition crew can go home," I said calmly, "because once the contents of this time capsule become public, a lot of people are going to have some explaining to do." Marcus's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. "You're bluffing. Those documents can't possibly. Want to bet your entire development company on that?" I picked up another folder. Should we start with the real estate holdings of council members' families in 1922? Or jump straight to the current property records showing some interesting patterns of ownership? Because the time capsule hadn't just preserved history, it had protected truth. And in River Heights, truth was about to become the most powerful medicine of all. The time capsule contained more than just legal documents. As I pulled out the next folder, the sweet scent of aged paper filled the shop, mixing with the herbal aromas that had perfumed this space for a century. These, I said, laying out a series of photographs, are from Mayor Harrison's personal collection. He was meticulous about documenting everything, including meetings that certain people claimed never happened. The photos showed gatherings in smoky back rooms, handshakes between politicians and developers, faces that belonged to River Heights' most prominent families, names that still appeared on building plaques and street signs throughout the city. That's Elizabeth Morton squinted at one photo. That's Gerald Davidson. Your grandfather, isn't it, Mr. Davidson? Marcus's face went from gray to white. His grandfather had been a powerful real estate magnate in the 1950s, known for urban renewal projects that had destroyed immigrant neighborhoods. Mayor Harrison didn't just create a legal protection for this shop, I explained. He created an archive of every corrupt deal, every displaced family, every piece of River Heights' hidden history. He knew someday someone would need this evidence. But why? Marcus found his voice. Why would a mayor document his own city's corruption? I pulled out a letter, carefully preserved in its original envelope. Because Mayor Harrison was dying when he created this time capsule. He'd seen how power could corrupt, how money could erase history. He wanted to leave behind a way to fight back. The letter was addressed to my grandfather, Li Wei Chun. My dear friend, by the time you read this, I will be gone. The cancer moves quickly, though your remedies have given me precious months with my family. I leave this record in your care, knowing that someday others will try to destroy what you've built. The capsule contains more than just evidence of past wrongs. It contains proof of a pattern, one that continues to this day. Watch for these signs: sudden rezoning, rushed council votes, mysterious property transfers. When you see them, open the capsule. The truth it contains will be needed. Your shop is more than just a business. It is a testament to the real healing River Heights needs, not just of bodies, but of the corruption that sickens our community's soul. Use these truths wisely. William Harrison. Elizabeth Morton was rapidly taking notes, her legal mind clearly processing implications. These records, they show a consistent pattern of property manipulation going back a century. The same families, the same methods, the same corruption, I finished, including the current rezoning that made Mr. Davidson's project possible. Would you like to see the proof of which council members own shell companies that recently bought up surrounding properties? Marcus slumped into one of the shop's old wooden chairs. How long have you known about this? My father told me about the capsule on his deathbed last year. Said I'd know when it was time to open it. I began laying out more documents. When the rezoning vote happened so suddenly, when your project was approved without proper community review, I knew that time had come. The demolition crew had quietly disappeared, sensing the shift in power. Elizabeth was still reading, her expression growing more concerned with each page. Mr. Davidson, she said finally, we have a serious problem. These records don't just document historical corruption. They provide evidence of current criminal activity, multiple violations of ethics laws, zoning regulations, and something else, I added, pulling out the final folder. Evidence that certain traditional remedies in this shop can treat conditions that modern medicine struggles with, including the rare cancer that killed Mayor Harrison, the same cancer his great-grandson, current city council member Robert Harrison, is secretly battling. Marcus's head snapped up. Robert Harrison is sick? Terminal diagnosis 3 months ago, right before he changed his vote on the rezoning. I opened one of the shop's ancient drawers, removed a small package of herbs. My grandfather developed this formula for Mayor Harrison. It gave him an extra year of life. His great-grandson doesn't know it exists because certain people have worked very hard to dismiss traditional medicine as worthless. The implications hung in the air like incense. A century of corruption, of dismissing immigrant knowledge, of trying to erase traditions that could help people, all to make way for profit. What do you want? Marcus asked quietly. 3 things, I replied. First, your development project ends. The historic district stays intact. Second, you support new zoning laws protecting traditional businesses like mine. And third, I held up the herb package. You helped me reach Robert Harrison. Because some things are more important than real estate deals. The changes that followed transformed River Heights. The exposed corruption led to resignations, reforms, and a new appreciation for the city's diverse heritage. Robert Harrison, after beginning treatment with my grandfather's formula, became a champion for integrating traditional medicine with modern healthcare. Marcus Davidson surprised everyone by reinventing his company, focusing on restoring historic buildings rather than demolishing them. The knowledge that his family's wealth was built on destroyed immigrant neighborhoods had sparked something like redemption. Chen's apothecary became a model for cultural preservation and medical integration. Doctors from the university hospital began collaborating with me, studying the effectiveness of traditional remedies. The shop's wooden cabinets now held both ancient herbs and modern research papers. The time capsule's contents were donated to the city archives, with copies held by watchdog groups to ensure transparency. Its revelation had lanced a century-old wound, allowing real healing to begin. 1 year later, I stood behind the same counter where my grandfather had first served Mayor Harrison. The shop had been restored, its history now proudly displayed alongside its remedies. Medical students interned here, learning to bridge cultural traditions and healing. Robert Harrison, his cancer in remission, often stopped by to share stories about his great-grandfather. He knew, he told me once, that real healing takes more than just medicine. It takes truth, justice, and respect for traditions that are older than our ambitions. The developers who had once dismissed Chen's apothecary as worthless now pointed to it as an example of successful historic preservation. The block around it thrived as other immigrant-owned businesses returned to their roots. Marcus Davidson's daughter, studying to become a doctor, started interning at the shop. "I want to understand," she said, "how medicine can heal more than just bodies, how it can heal communities." The brass bell still chimed above the door, but now it welcomed a new generation seeking both traditional remedies and historical truth. The wooden drawers still held herbs that had healed River Heights for a century, while computers documented their effectiveness for modern research. Mayor Harrison's time capsule had done more than save one building. It had preserved something more precious: the understanding that a community's health depends on honoring its past while building its future. In the end, the most powerful medicine wasn't in any of my grandfather's herbs. It was in the truth that had waited patiently beneath the foundation, ready to heal the corruption that had sickened River Heights for generations. The developer who had called my shop worthless had helped prove its true value, not just as a place of physical healing, but as a guardian of community memory and justice. And every time the brass bell chimed, it rang with a century of vindication. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned. The kitchen of Bella Vista was alive with its usual evening chaos. Steam rose from pots of simmering marinara, the wood-fired oven crackled with fresh pizzas, and servers rushed through the swinging doors with trays balanced precariously on their shoulders. It was Tuesday night, which meant we were slammed despite it being a weekday. I stood at the pass, checking each plate before it left the kitchen, ensuring every dish met the standards I'd spent 15 years perfecting. "Order up. Table 12. I called out, sliding 2 plates of my signature osso buco across the stainless steel counter. The servers knew better than to let my food sit under the heat lamps. I'd trained them well. That's when I heard it, the sound that would change everything. Heavy footsteps echoed from the dining room, followed by the slam of the kitchen door. My Uncle Antonio burst through, his face flushed red with anger, his expensive suit wrinkled from what I could only assume had been a heated discussion. Behind him trailed his son Marco, my cousin who'd never worked a single shift in this restaurant, but somehow held the title of assistant manager. "Sophia," Antonio's voice boomed across the kitchen, causing every cook to freeze mid-chop. "Drop what you're doing. We need to talk. Now." I glanced at the dinner rush around me. 6 tickets on the rail, 3 more coming in, and a full dining room expecting the quality they'd come to associate with Bella Vista. "Can it wait 30 minutes? We're in the middle of." "No, it cannot wait." Antonio's tone was ice cold. "My office. Now." The walk to the cramped office above the restaurant felt like a death march. Every step up those narrow stairs echoed with 15 years of memories. I'd climbed them as a 17-year-old girl, desperate for work after my parents died in that car accident. Antonio had taken me in, given me a job, and I'd foolishly believed it was out of family loyalty. The office was exactly as it had always been: cluttered desk, old filing cabinets, and the faint smell of garlic that permeated every inch of the building. Antonio settled into his chair behind the desk like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. Marco leaned against the wall, smirking in that way that made my skin crawl. 15 years, Antonio began, steepling his fingers. 15 years you've worked here, Sophia. And I've been generous. Very generous. I said nothing, waiting for him to get to the point. But things are changing. The restaurant industry is evolving, and we need fresh blood. Young ideas. Marco here has been working with a consultant, developing new strategies for growth. Marco stepped forward, his chest puffed out with pride. We're talking about modernization, Sophia. Food trucks, social media marketing, maybe even a reality TV show. But we need someone who understands the current market. Someone with vision. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marco, who couldn't tell a sauté pan from a stock pot, was lecturing me about vision. Me, who had developed every signature dish on the menu. Me, who had personally trained every cook currently working the line. Me, who had turned a failing neighborhood joint into the most sought-after reservation in Little Italy. What exactly are you saying? I asked, though I already knew. Antonio leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. We're restructuring. Marco will be taking over as head chef and general manager. We appreciate everything you've done, but it's time for new leadership. The words hit me like a physical blow. Head chef. Antonio, Marco has never even worked a shift in the kitchen. He doesn't need to work shifts, Marco interjected. I have vision. I understand business strategy. You're just a cook, Sophia. Just a cook. The phrase echoed in my head like a gunshot. Just a cook who had arrived at 5 a.m. every morning for 15 years to prep for the day. Just a cook who had stayed until midnight cleaning and planning menus. Just a cook who had turned down job offers from 3 Michelin-starred restaurants because I thought this place was my home. Pack your things, Sophia, Antonio said, his voice final. This restaurant was never yours to begin with. Those words cut deeper than any knife I'd ever handled. Never mind to begin with. As if the blood, sweat, and tears I'd poured into every corner of this building meant nothing. As if the recipes I'd perfected, the staff I'd trained, the reputation I'd built from scratch were just footnotes in someone else's story. I looked around the office, at the awards on the wall that bore my signature dishes' names, at the photo from our first 5-star review, where I stood proudly next to Antonio, at the business license that might have Antonio's name on it, but represented my life's work. Then I smiled. Not the bitter, angry smile they probably expected, but a genuine, calm smile that seemed to unnerve them both. You're absolutely right, I said quietly, standing up and smoothing down my chef's coat. This restaurant was never mine. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, where my team was still frantically working the dinner rush. I untied my apron slowly, folding it with the same care I'd shown every dish I'd ever plated. The kitchen fell silent as they watched me hang it on its hook for the last time. Sophia, Maria, my sous chef, looked at me with confusion. What's happening? Change of management, I said simply. Marco will be your new head chef. The collective gasp from my kitchen staff would have been comical under different circumstances. These were people who respected me, who had learned from me, who trusted my leadership. The idea of taking orders from Marco, who once asked me if we needed to refrigerate olive oil, was clearly incomprehensible to them. But I didn't say another word. I gathered my knives, my personal recipes, and walked out of Bella Vista for what I thought would be the last time. What Antonio and Marco didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for 3 years. It started small, almost by accident. The building that housed Bella Vista was owned by an elderly woman named Mrs. Chun, who lived in the apartment upstairs. She'd mentioned one day that she was having trouble managing the property taxes and maintenance costs. As someone who'd grown up with nothing, I understood financial struggle intimately, so I'd offered to help. First, it was just covering the quarterly tax payments. Then, when the building needed a new roof, I quietly arranged for the repairs and asked Mrs. Chun to let me handle the monthly payments. When the ancient electrical system needed updating, I hired the contractors and managed the project. Each time, I'd asked Mrs. Chun to draw up a simple contract. Nothing fancy, just documentation that I was contributing to the building's maintenance and improvements. What started as neighborly assistance gradually evolved into something more significant. By the time Antonio fired me, I owned 68% of the building. Mrs. Chun had been more than happy to sell me her shares over time. She was tired of being a landlord, tired of dealing with repairs and tenant issues. But she was also smart enough to recognize a good deal when she saw one. I'd been paying market rate for the shares, sometimes even a premium, and I'd taken all the headaches of property management off her hands. The beauty of it was that Antonio had no idea. The building ownership records were public information, but Antonio Benedetti wasn't the type of man who concerned himself with such details. He paid his rent every month and assumed that was the end of his obligation. He never bothered to check who was cashing those checks. I spent the first week after my firing setting up my next move. I contacted a property management company, arranged for legal representation, and had all the documentation professionally reviewed. Everything was airtight. I was the majority owner of the building, which meant I had the legal right to make decisions about tenancy agreements. The current lease between Antonio and Mrs. Chun was set to expire in 90 days. What Antonio didn't realize was that I, as the new majority owner, was under no obligation to renew it. On day 30 after my firing, I had my lawyer deliver the eviction notice. I wasn't there to see Antonio's face when he received it, but I heard about it from Maria, who called me that evening, her voice mixed with shock and barely contained laughter. "Sophia, you need to hear this," she said. "Antonio came storming into the kitchen this afternoon, waving some legal papers and screaming about lawyers and property rights. He was so red I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there in the walk-in cooler." "What did he say exactly?" I asked, though I could imagine. He kept yelling, "This is impossible. This is my restaurant." Marco was running around trying to figure out what was happening, and honestly, it was the most entertaining shift I've worked in years. The eviction notice was straightforward. Antonio had 30 days to vacate the premises. All fixtures, equipment, and modifications made to the building would remain, as they were now considered part of the property. The lease would not be renewed under current management. But I wasn't finished. Within 48 hours of delivering the eviction notice, I had filed the paperwork to open my own restaurant in the same location. Sophia's Kitchen would debut exactly 1 week after Bella Vista's forced closure. I'd already contacted every member of my former kitchen staff, offering them positions at 10% above their current salaries. I'd reached out to our regular suppliers, many of whom had been frustrated with Marco's attempts to modernize their long-standing relationships. I'd even reserved the phone number that Bella Vista had been using for 15 years. The local food scene in Little Italy was small enough that word traveled fast. Within days, everyone knew that Sophia Moretti, the real chef behind Bella Vista's success, was opening her own place in the exact same location where Antonio had fired her. The irony was delicious. 2 weeks after the eviction notice was served, Antonio showed up at my apartment. He looked haggard, older somehow, as if the stress of losing his restaurant had aged him years in a matter of days. "Sophia," he said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, not inviting him in. "About this misunderstanding. About the building. About the restaurant." He was trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the desperation in his eyes. "Maybe we can work something out. A partnership, perhaps." "A partnership?" I almost laughed. "You mean like the partnership we had for 15 years, where I did all the work and you took all the credit? That's not fair, Sophia. I gave you a job when you had nothing. I treated you like family." "No, Antonio. You treated me like free labor. There's a difference." He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the hallway as if worried the neighbors might overhear. "Look, maybe I was hasty. Maybe we can find a position for you at the new location." "New location? We're looking at a space in Queens. Smaller, but we can make it work. Marco has some investors interested." I studied his face, seeing the truth he wasn't saying. They were scrambling. Without the building, without the established location, without the reputation I'd built, Bella Vista was just another failed restaurant concept. And without me, Marco's vision was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. "I'm not interested," I said simply. "Sophia, be reasonable. You can't just steal my restaurant." "I didn't steal anything. I bought a building. You rented space in that building. The lease expired. It's basic business. But the name, the reputation, the recipes. The name was registered to the LLC I formed 3 years ago. The reputation was built on my cooking. And the recipes?" I smiled. "Well, those live up here." I tapped my temple. "Try to take those." Antonio's face went through several expressions: anger, disbelief, and finally, something approaching respect. "You planned this? All of it?" I planned for my future. I just didn't realize it would come in handy so soon. He stood there for a long moment, as if waiting for me to change my mind or offer some kind of compromise. When neither came, he turned to leave. "Sophia," he called over his shoulder. "This isn't over." "Yes," I replied calmly. "It is." Sophia's kitchen opened to a line around the block. Every food blogger, restaurant critic, and loyal customer who had discovered their favorite dishes at Bella Vista was curious to see what I would do with complete creative control. I didn't disappoint. The menu featured refined versions of the dishes that had made Bella Vista famous, alongside new creations that I'd been developing in my head for years. The service was flawless, trained by staff who understood my standards and shared my commitment to excellence. The atmosphere was warm but sophisticated, honoring the building's history while establishing its new identity. Within 6 months, we had our first James Beard nomination. Within a year, we'd earned our first Michelin star. The reviews were unanimous. Sophia's kitchen wasn't just better than Bella Vista had ever been, it was in a completely different league. Antonio made a few more attempts to contact me over the years. He sent lawyers, which my lawyers handled efficiently. He tried to poach my staff, which failed spectacularly when he couldn't match the working conditions or salary I provided. He even attempted to open a competing restaurant called The Real Bella Vista, which lasted exactly 4 months before closing due to poor reviews and health code violations. Marco, I heard through the grapevine, eventually took a job managing a chain restaurant in New Jersey. His dreams of culinary stardom had apparently collided with the reality that vision without skill is just wishful thinking. The building that houses Sophia's kitchen is now worth 4 times what I paid for it. The restaurant itself has become a destination, not just for tourists visiting Little Italy, but for serious food lovers who appreciate authentic Italian cuisine prepared with passion and precision. Sometimes I stand in the same spot where Antonio fired me, looking out at a dining room full of satisfied customers enjoying food I created, served by staff I trained, in a building I own. The irony never gets old. People often ask me if I feel guilty about what happened to Antonio and Marco. The truth is I don't. They made their choice when they decided I wasn't valuable enough to keep. They forgot that in the restaurant business, talent and dedication matter more than family connections or false bravado. I didn't steal their restaurant. I simply revealed who had been running it all along. And now, every single night, as I watch my team execute service with the precision of a Swiss watch, as I taste dishes that represent 15 years of experience and passion, as I greet customers who have become friends and friends who have become family, I'm reminded of something important. Antonio was right about one thing. Bella Vista was never mine to begin with. But Sophia's kitchen? This is mine. Every recipe, every decision, every success, every failure. It's mine because I built it with my own hands, my own vision, and my own uncompromising standards. And nobody can ever take that away from me. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.